He slid the ring onto her finger with a shaky hand and a smile that wasn't his. Everyone around them gasped and cheered, champagne glasses lifted, phone cameras flashing. She looked down at the glittering vintage diamond nestled in the gold band, her eyes wide with surprise and joy, pure elation washing over her face as if she'd won something sacred. And in a way she had. But not fairly. Not honestly. Not with respect. I was standing in the crowd, near the back of the reception tent, holding a glass of lukewarm white wine I hadn't even sipped. My stomach had already twisted itself into knots the moment I saw the ring. My grandmother's ring. The same one I'd kept safe in a little velvet box at the back of my drawer, wrapped in tissue paper and tucked behind old journals. The same ring my grandmother wore for 57 years, passed to me in her final days with a whisper. Only give this to someone who truly honors love. My brother, Jason, had never asked, never mentioned it. Never once even hinted that he had a special plan involving something so personal, so sacred to me. And now he was using it to propose, to her. To Vanessa. Vanessa, with the perfect hair and icy smile. Vanessa, who once, accidentally, left me out of the bridal shower group chat. Who told me once to my face, "You don't really get along with people, do you?" Like it was a quirky fact about me, not a dagger. And Jason, he just laughed. Because Vanessa could get away with anything in his eyes. She had that effect on him. She always did. Everyone thought they were perfect. But I knew better. I knew the screaming matches behind closed doors, the time he called me crying because she told him he was a failure and a child. I knew the fights about money, about careers, about babies. But they always wore their smiles in public like polished masks. And now, under fairy lights and expensive linen, Jason had sealed his forever with a lie, using the only thing I had left of the one woman who ever made me feel safe. The applause died down. People returned to their seats. Jason and Vanessa were being congratulated by a circle of giddy friends, showing off the ring, talking about how timeless it looked, how romantic it was to use an heirloom. My jaw clenched. My heart was pounding. My hand was still trembling from the moment I saw it slide onto Vanessa's finger. It felt like betrayal layered with theft, wrapped in a smile. I couldn't stay still. I left the tent, walked along the gravel path toward the parking lot, pretending to take a call. The night was cool, the stars blurred through my watery eyes. I pulled out my phone and stared at it blankly, not even knowing who I'd call. My hands were cold, my throat tight. I leaned against the side of a parked car, trying to breathe. I remembered how my grandmother used to rub the ring when she was thinking, how the diamond caught the sunlight when she sat at the kitchen window. I remembered how she held my hand when she gave it to me. For the right person, she'd said. You'll know. And I knew Jason wasn't the right person. Not for that ring. Not for what it meant. 15 minutes passed before I walked back into the reception. People were eating now. Music had started. Vanessa's laugh, sharp and rehearsed, rang across the tent. My parents waved me over, but I pretended not to see them. I sat at the far end, alone, pushing salad around my plate. Jason finally noticed me after dessert. He walked over, his tux slightly rumpled, his grin lazy. "Hey," he said, nudging my shoulder. "You okay? You disappeared after the proposal." I looked up at him, my voice low. "That ring, where did you get it?" He blinked. "What?" "Oh, the ring? I found it in your room. A few weeks ago. Figured you weren't using it. Thought it'd be cool to keep it in the family." "You found it?" My voice cracked. "Yeah," he shrugged. "You weren't wearing it. I didn't think you'd mind. Grandma would have loved Vanessa. She said it should stay with someone in love, right? She said it should go to someone who respects love." I snapped, louder than I intended. Heads turned. Jason shifted awkwardly, eyes flicking around. "Okay, let's not do this now," he muttered. But I was already standing. "No," I said. "Let's do it now." My voice trembled, but I didn't care anymore. I was shaking, not with fear, but with years of swallowed frustration, of being quiet, agreeable, invisible. My fingers felt electric as I walked toward Vanessa, who was talking to some of her friends near the dance floor. She turned, surprised to see me.
Oh.
Hey. I need to see the ring, I said. The group fell silent. Jason caught up behind me, whispering, "Don't make a scene." But I was done hiding behind scenes. I reached out, slowly, not forcefully but firmly. "It's not yours. You never asked." He never asked. "That ring belongs to me." Vanessa scoffed. "Are you serious?" "Here." "Yes," I said, steady now.
"Here."
"Right now." She looked at Jason, waiting for him to defend her. But he didn't. He just stood there, his mouth slightly open, looking like a little boy caught stealing candy. The silence stretched long enough to sting. Vanessa pulled her hand away, like I'd burned her. But she slipped the ring off and held it out to me, her expression unreadable. I took it back. And for the first time that night, I could breathe. I wasn't always this bold. For most of my life, I was the kind of person who let things slide. The peacekeeper. The one who swallowed her feelings just to keep the room calm. I was the kid who always let her brother take the last cookie, who kept her mouth shut when he broke something and let me take the blame. I thought that was love. I thought that's what sisters were supposed to do. I'm Ava, 32, quiet on the outside, a mess of thoughts and emotions on the inside. The kind of woman people describe as sweet, or stable, or a little too private. And they're not wrong. I was raised to be small, to take up as little space as possible, to nod and smile, and make sure no one was uncomfortable. But comfort, I've learned, often comes at the expense of truth. And mine had been buried for years. Jason, my younger brother by 2 years, has always been the golden one. Tall, charming, wildly confident even when he had no reason to be. He was the boy teachers forgave, the one who made mistakes look like accidents. Everyone loved Jason, especially my parents. I could have aced an exam, and Jason would still get praised more for remembering to take out the trash. I didn't resent him, not exactly. I resented the way he could take what he wanted without consequence. The way the world bent to him, and he never even noticed it. Our family wasn't dramatic. Not on the surface. We were one of those clean, polite, middle-class families who had nice dinners, sent polite holiday cards, and avoided conflict like it was a disease. But beneath the surface, there were cracks. Tensions. Moments that got rewritten in everyone's memory so we wouldn't have to admit we were broken. Like the time Jason crashed Dad's car after drinking at a party. Somehow, the story became about how lucky we were that he wasn't hurt, not about how he lied, or how I was the one who covered for him when the cops called the house. That kind of history does something to you. It teaches you that being right isn't the same as being loved. That silence gets rewarded. And for a long time, I obeyed. Then came Grandma Evelyn. She was my anchor in that family, fierce, honest, unbothered by appearances. Where my parents tiptoed around feelings, she stomped right through them with steel-toe boots. She told me stories about her wild youth, about how she eloped with my grandfather after a 3-week courtship, and how she never regretted a single impulsive decision. She was wild in the way I never allowed myself to be. But she saw something in me, something I didn't even know was there. When she was dying, I was the one who sat with her. Jason came once, for 20 minutes, looking uncomfortable the whole time. I held her hand for hours, listening to her hum lullabies and share secrets. And on the last week of her life, she gave me her wedding ring, the one she wore every day for 57 years. "It's not just a ring," she told me, her voice raspy. "It's a promise. You don't give it to someone who says they love you. You give it to someone who proves it. Someone who chooses you even when it's hard." I nodded, holding back tears. "Don't let anyone take that from you, Ava," she said. "Especially not someone who doesn't know what it means." That ring became my most precious thing. Not because of the gold or the diamond, but because it was the first time someone trusted me with something that mattered. It was mine, not as a possession, but as a legacy. I didn't wear it. I kept it safe. I told myself I'd know when the time was right. I hadn't dated seriously in years, so it never crossed my mind that I needed to protect it from anyone. Until Jason and Vanessa got engaged. They met at a networking event in Manhattan, Vanessa in a white pantsuit and red lipstick, Jason in one of those blazers with no tie, hair perfectly disheveled. She was sharp, confident, magnetic in a cold sort of way. She didn't laugh so much as smirk. From the beginning, I knew she didn't like me. I was too quiet, too reserved. She liked people who could keep up with her edge, and I wasn't interested in performing for her approval. At dinners, she'd talk over me. When I brought dessert to family gatherings, she'd pretend to be allergic to something in it. The worst part? Jason never said a word. He'd laugh nervously, change the subject, or disappear to take a work call whenever tension arose. He never stood up for me, never told her to show respect. I don't even think he noticed how she chipped away at me every time she was near. Still, I played along. I showed up to their engagement party, smiled through the speeches, gave them a tasteful gift. I watched them twirl around the room, Jason looking dazed with love, or maybe just relief that someone else had taken over the role of decision-maker in his life. Vanessa was always the one driving. Jason just rode along. And then came the wedding weekend. A sprawling estate, all white roses and vintage lace, the kind of place that costs more per day than I made in a month. Vanessa had thought of everything. Themed cocktails, embroidered napkins, even a string quartet that only played Taylor Swift covers. The night before the wedding, we stayed in the guest houses on the property. I hadn't seen Jason much. He'd been busy with final rehearsals and bachelor party shenanigans. I wandered back to my room early, exhausted from pretending I wasn't dreading every moment of this. That's when I noticed the drawer slightly open. At first, I thought maybe housekeeping had forgotten to close it. But then I saw the tissue paper sticking out, the pale blue paper I had wrapped around Grandma's ring years ago. My stomach dropped. I opened it and found nothing. The box was gone. The tissue crumpled. And I knew, someone had been in my things. But the only people with access were the bridal party and family. Jason. It felt surreal. I waited until morning to confront him, hoping, praying, there was another explanation. Maybe he borrowed it. Maybe he was planning to give it back. Maybe this was some weird misunderstanding. But then he proposed. In the middle of the reception, in front of everyone, like a grand romantic gesture. The crowd screamed. Vanessa clutched her chest like she'd been struck by beauty itself. And on her finger, glinting under the fairy lights, was my ring. It wasn't just the shock of seeing it. It was the gut punch of realization. He had gone through my things. He had taken it. No conversation. No permission. Just took it because he wanted it. Because he always did whatever he wanted and assumed I'd never stop him. And maybe I wouldn't have. Maybe if it were anything else, money, time, patience, I would have let it go. Again. But not this. Not the ring. Not the one thing that had never been tainted by family politics or guilt or silence. As the evening dragged on, I watched them paraded around. It's vintage, Vanessa said proudly, showing her hand to anyone with a pulse. Family heirloom. Gorgeous, right? I could see the way her fingers curled protectively around it, already imagining herself the matriarch of something she had no right to claim. My parents didn't know. They just looked thrilled. My mother whispered to me, "Isn't this magical? Vanessa has such refined taste." My dad clapped Jason on the back like he'd just brokered $1 million deal. And Jason? He kept glancing at me like he knew, deep down, that he'd done something wrong, but not wrong enough to stop smiling. And that's what made it worse. He knew. He just didn't care. That night, lying in the guest house bed, I stared at the ceiling for hours. My mind kept looping over the scene, her gasp, the cheers, the flash of diamond. I kept hearing Grandma's voice. "Don't let anyone take that from you." I realized that the ring wasn't just about love. It was about dignity, about boundaries, about honoring something sacred. And I was done being the girl who let her voice get drowned out just to avoid making waves. So I made a decision. I would take it back. And not in private. Not in a phone call months later. Not in a polite, sideline chat at a brunch table. No, I would do it exactly the way they had done it, publicly, boldly, so that everyone could see the truth, that what they celebrated was built on something stolen. I didn't know how it would unfold. I didn't know what I would say or how people would react. But I knew one thing with absolute clarity. That ring was never hers. And I was going to make sure the world knew it. The silence after I took the ring felt louder than the music still playing in the background. Vanessa's hand hovered midair, empty now, her fingers curled slightly like they still expected something to be there. Jason stood beside her, eyes wide, cheeks reddening by the second. No one knew what to say. I could feel the weight of every gaze turning toward me, friends, relatives, strangers, each face a question mark. My heart pounded so hard it was all I could hear. But I didn't move. I held the ring in my palm, my fingers wrapped tightly around it like I was afraid someone might try to take it again. I looked at Vanessa one last time, her expression a mix of rage and humiliation, and I walked out. Not fast. Not dramatically. Just steady. Each step pushing through the thick wall of judgment closing in around me. I didn't stop until I was outside the tent, under the moonlight alone. The cold air hit my skin like clarity. My breathing was shallow, but inside, something had settled. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was fading into the background. I had drawn a line. I had reclaimed something that was never his to give. But I wasn't prepared for what came next. The whispers started before I even made it to my car. Did she just take the ring off her hand? Is that her brother? Oh my God. This is better than reality TV. And then someone, probably one of Vanessa's always online bridesmaids, filmed the entire confrontation and uploaded it within the hour. By the time I got back to my apartment that night, the video had already been shared on TikTok and Instagram, captioned with, *, she took back the engagement ring mid-wedding. Drama. *. The next morning, I woke up to hundreds of notifications. My inbox was full. My phone buzzing every few minutes. People I hadn't spoken to in years were sending messages, some supportive, some not. One girl I barely remembered from high school wrote, *, just saw you on TikTok. Honestly, you're iconic. * Another, from a distant cousin. * Wow. Couldn't you have waited until the next day? That was cruel. * News outlets got wind of it within days. Family feud at fairytale wedding. One headline read. Another. Sister crashes brother's proposal over heirloom ring. Was she justified? My face wasn't in the video clearly, but someone identified me anyway. My social media started filling with strangers' opinions about my life. People argued in the comments about what I'd done. Some called me brave. Others called me selfish. Meanwhile, Jason didn't call. He didn't text. Not even a single word. Vanessa, however, posted a photo the day after with a new caption. * Some people don't want others to be happy. But love always wins, ring sparkles. * Her hand was empty in the picture, but her smile was viciously intact. I knew her well enough to know she wasn't going to let this go quietly. She would twist it, spin it, make herself the victim. She was already trying. I felt like I was living in a nightmare. Every time I opened my phone, someone was dissecting my motives. People who didn't know me at all were debating whether I had a right to take the ring. A podcast even discussed it. * Was this a case of justified justice or just plain jealousy? * A stranger online created a poll. But what hurt most wasn't the public circus. It was the silence from Jason. For a week, I heard nothing. And in that silence, my certainty started to wobble. Had I gone too far? Should I have handled it differently? I replayed it over and over. The confrontation, the look on his face, the way he didn't defend me, the way he didn't even try to explain. Then finally he showed up. It was a Saturday. I was at my apartment, still in sweatpants, hair a mess, drinking coffee that had gone cold. The buzzer rang and my chest tightened. I didn't need to ask who it was. He stood in the hallway looking exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, his hair unkempt. Not the polished, smug version of him the world usually saw. Just Jason. My brother. The boy I once built blanket forts with. The boy I used to defend when he got picked on at school. I figured you wouldn't answer if I called, he said. He was right. I let him in. He sat on the edge of the couch, hands clasped, like he was waiting for a sentence to be passed down. I sat across from him, silent. He stared at the floor for a long time before he finally said, "I didn't think it would matter to you." That sentence broke something in me. "You didn't think it would matter?" My voice cracked. "You went into my room. You opened my drawer. You took something you knew belonged to me. And you didn't even ask. And you didn't think it would matter?" He looked ashamed. "I knew you'd say no." "Exactly," I said. "And you did it anyway." I wanted the proposal to be special," he muttered. "You always keep things to yourself. I didn't think you'd ever use it. It was just sitting there." I shook my head. "It wasn't just a ring, Jason. It was her. It was her love. Her trust. You don't just take that and slap it on a moment like it's a prop." He looked like he might cry, and a part of me wanted to comfort him. But the rest of me stayed still. "She would have wanted it to stay in the family," he said weakly. "No," I said. "She would have wanted it to go to someone who understands what real love means. Someone who protects it. Who asks. You didn't ask. You never ask." He didn't argue. He just nodded slowly. "I messed up," he whispered. There was a long silence between us. The kind filled with all the things we'd never said. The way I'd always been the background player in his story. The way he always assumed I'd be okay with whatever he needed. The way I never told him I wasn't. "I didn't want to destroy your engagement," I said softly. "But I wasn't going to let her wear that ring. Not for a second longer." He looked at me then, really looked. And for the first time in years, I saw something flicker in his eyes that wasn't arrogance. It was understanding. Painful, slow coming, but real. "I broke things with Vanessa," he said. "A couple days ago. She said it was embarrassing being with someone who lets their sister humiliate them in public." I didn't say anything. He let out a humorless laugh. "Guess that tells me everything I needed to know." I nodded, quietly. We sat in silence for a long time. No apologies. No hugs. Just truth. Finally, when he stood to leave, I handed him something. The ring. In its velvet box. "Keep it safe," I said. "Until you know what it really means." He took it, gently with both hands. And nodded. There was no big resolution. No Instagram post. No public declaration of forgiveness. Just a quiet, broken line beginning to mend. The media attention faded in the weeks that followed. People moved on to the next scandal. But something in me stayed changed. I had stood up. I had reclaimed more than a ring. I had reclaimed myself. And I knew Grandma would have been proud. The weeks after Jason's visit passed in strange silence. Not heavy, not painful, just quiet. A kind of emotional exhale that I hadn't experienced in years. The headlines faded. The comments slowed. My name stopped trending. I was grateful for that. But more than anything, I was grateful for the clarity that came with it. For the first time in my adult life, I didn't feel invisible. I wasn't just someone's daughter, sister, or afterthought. I had drawn a boundary. I had spoken up. I had acted. And that changed everything. I spent more time with myself than I had in years. Real time. Walks alone in the park. Mornings reading in the sun. Journaling. Therapy, even. I hadn't realized how much I'd buried, how often I made myself small to keep the peace. And for what? A family dynamic that erased me the second I said something real? One evening, I sat on my couch, holding Grandma's ring again. The diamond shimmered under the soft light, quiet but unmistakably strong, just like her. Just like I was learning to be. I remembered something she once told me when I was 17, crying in her kitchen after a fight with my parents. She put her hands on mine and said, "Sweetheart, sometimes loving yourself means disappointing others. And that's okay. You don't owe anyone your silence." That memory sparked something. I realized I didn't just want to keep this transformation to myself. I wanted to share it, not in a performative, look at me sort of way, but with purpose. I knew I wasn't the only one who had grown up being the quiet one. I wasn't the only woman who'd been pushed into the background of her own story. So I started writing. Not a novel. Not yet. But personal essays. Reflections. Honest accounts of what it felt like to find your voice after years of hiding it. I submitted one piece to a small online magazine, not expecting much. 2 weeks later, they published it under the title, The Day I Took My Grandmother's Ring Back and Found Myself. The response stunned me. Emails poured in. Messages from women, some older, some my age, who had their own versions of the same story. I thought I was alone, one woman wrote. Thank you for saying what I never could. Another said, you didn't just take a ring. You took back your power. I'm inspired to do the same. Those words meant more than I could explain. They made me realize that what I did wasn't just about family, it was about worth, about reclaiming something sacred in a world that often tells quiet women to sit down and smile. So I kept writing. Each essay peeled back another layer. I shared about Grandma Evelyn, about growing up in Jason's shadow, about the dinner tables where I bit my tongue so hard it bled. And slowly, those essays turned into chapters. I didn't know it yet, but I was building a book, one truth at a time. Meanwhile, Jason's life was shifting in its own way. Word got around that he and Vanessa had ended things. Not dramatically, not even publicly, but definitively. She moved out of his apartment 2 weeks after the wedding that wasn't. I heard from our cousin that Vanessa was already back in the dating scene, spinning the story to make herself the heroine who escaped a family mess. Jason didn't fight it, didn't try to fix the narrative. Instead, he started pulling away from the social circles that used to define him. He stopped posting online, skipped the usual after-work drinks. From what I could gather, he'd started going to therapy too. For once, he wasn't running. One afternoon, out of the blue, I got a text from him. Jason, you free to meet? Need to show you something. I agreed, cautiously curious. We met at a quiet park near our childhood neighborhood. The same place we used to ride bikes and sneak gummy bears when Mom wasn't looking. He looked different. Not in a dramatic way, still the same tousled hair, casual clothes, but there was something softer in his eyes. Less armor. He held up a small notebook, worn at the edges. I've been writing, he said, almost shyly. I raised my eyebrows. He laughed.
Yeah.
I know. Not what anyone expects from me. But I've been thinking a lot. About everything. About you. About Grandma. And about how much I missed while I was busy being the star of the show. I didn't say anything. I let him talk. I read that essay you published, he continued. The part about always being the one who apologizes just to keep the peace, it hit me. I never saw it. I never wanted to see it. He held out the notebook. I guess it's my side of things. Stuff I need to own. Things I remember differently. Things I ignored. I took the notebook gently. It felt heavier than it looked. He sat beside me on the bench, our shoulders barely touching. I know it doesn't fix anything, he said. But I want to learn how to be better. I don't want to be the guy who takes things because he thinks he deserves them. I want to be the kind of man Grandma would have trusted with that ring. That hit me in the chest. I looked at him, not as the golden boy, not as the brother who'd hurt me, but as someone trying to rebuild. And that meant something. Thank you, I said quietly. That takes a lot. We didn't hug. Not then. But something between us shifted, an invisible thread tightening, no longer fraying. A few weeks later, something unexpected happened. A literary agent reached out to me. She'd read my essays, loved my voice, and asked if I had a manuscript. I hesitated. I wasn't sure I was ready. But something inside me, the part that had walked out of that wedding reception with trembling hands but unshakable resolve, said, yes. You are, We worked together over the next few months. Every chapter poured from me like water breaking through a dam. I wrote about Grandma Evelyn, about the ring, about the silence that defined my 20s and the voice that shattered it. And I wrote about Jason, not as a villain, but as a reflection. A mirror that forced me to look at my own limits, and then push past them. By the time the manuscript was finished, it didn't feel like just a book. It felt like healing. I titled it The Quiet One. When it got picked up for publication, the first person I told was Jason. He came to the launch party, quietly proud. No grand speeches. No stealing the spotlight. Just a brother, in the back of the room, clapping a little too hard when my name was announced. After the crowd died down, he pulled me aside. "I have something for you," he said. He reached into his coat pocket and handed me a small velvet pouch. Inside was a delicate gold necklace. Hanging from the chain was a miniature version of Grandma's ring, just the outline, etched in gold. A symbol. "It's not a gift," he said quickly. "It's a thank you for taking something back that needed to be taken." I blinked back tears. "Thank you, Jason." He smiled. "You know, you've always had the fire. You just finally let it burn." I wore that necklace every day after that. Not as a badge, not as a statement, but as a reminder of who I had become and what I was never going back to. The bookstore was packed, every seat filled, and the air thick with anticipation. It was the first big event since The Quiet One hit bestseller lists. People flew in from out of state, women clutching copies with highlighted passages and sticky notes, some even holding back tears before the event began. This wasn't just a book tour stop, it felt like a movement. A collective breath from people who had spent years in the shadows finally exhaling. And I was standing at the center of it. I looked around the room as they introduced me. My eyes caught glimpses of strangers who looked so familiar, not in features, but in feeling. Women with soft eyes and heavy stories. A teenage girl in the front row with bitten nails and a notebook in her lap. An older woman wiping the corner of her eye as if the weight of a memory just brushed past her. I swallowed hard, steadying my breath. Then I saw him, Jason, standing in the back, near the wall, arms crossed loosely, watching with quiet pride. He wasn't here to take anything. He was here to give something back. Himself. I stepped up to the mic. "Hi," I said, my voice cracking just a little. "I'm not used to seeing this many people listening." A gentle laugh rippled through the room. When I started writing this book, I didn't think anyone would care. I thought it was just my story, one awkward sister, one forgotten daughter, one very public moment with a ring I was never supposed to give up. But then I realized my story is your story. It's the story of every person who is told to sit down, be quiet, not make a fuss, who smiled to keep peace, who bit their tongue until they couldn't anymore. The room held still. That day at the wedding, I continued, when I walked up and took back the ring, it wasn't about revenge. It was about love. Love that's earned. Love that's asked for. Love that's respected. And I wasn't just taking back a family heirloom. I was taking back every part of myself I had given away too freely. The audience clapped. Some stood. Others wept. The energy surged, but all I could think about was how far I'd come. Not in miles, but in truth. After the event, there was a long line of readers waiting to get their books signed. One by one, they came forward. They shared pieces of themselves, stories of broken families, quiet resistance, healing. And I listened to every single one like it was sacred. Near the end of the line, Jason approached. He held a worn copy of The Quiet One. It was dog-eared, underlined, the spine bent from use. My breath caught in my throat. "I figured it was time I got this signed," he said softly. I smiled. "You sure you want her name in my story?" He chuckled. "It was never not yours." We stood quietly for a second. No tension, no resentment. Just recognition. "I read every chapter," he said, "even the ones that hurt. Especially those. You were honest. And it made me want to be honest too." He looked down, cleared his throat, and then finally met my eyes again. "You know that day, at the reception? I thought you ruined everything. I was angry, embarrassed. But now I realize you saved me from something I wasn't strong enough to walk away from. You showed me what integrity looks like. And I'll never forget it." I wanted to cry. Not from sadness, but from release. From knowing the boy I grew up with was finally becoming the man Grandma would have been proud of. "There's something else," he added, pulling a small envelope from his coat pocket. "It's from Mom and Dad." My stomach turned slightly. We hadn't spoken since the wedding. The fallout had been quiet but firm. They took Jason's side at first. Or more accurately, they They remained neutral in a way that made it clear which side they preferred. I hesitated before opening it. Jason waited. Inside was a handwritten letter.
Short. Clumsy.
But real. Asterisk. We didn't understand at first. We thought you were making a scene.
But now we see it was a stand. We're sorry.
You deserve more than we ever gave. Please come home when you're ready. Asterisk. My throat tightened. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. I folded the letter and nodded slowly. Maybe one day. Jason smiled. Whenever you're ready.
We hugged then.
Not a polite hug. A real one. The kind that mends. After the signing, we walked through the city streets, him carrying my bag, me laughing for the first time in days. We talked about old memories. About Grandma Evelyn. About what comes next. And what came next was more than I could have imagined. The book's success led to speaking invitations. Not fancy TED Talks, community events, women's shelters, university panels. Places where stories mattered. I didn't just share mine, I listened to theirs. And with every story I heard, I felt Grandma's presence, steady and proud. One evening, I stood at the edge of a lake, our family's summer cabin, long forgotten and finally visited again. Jason had taken the weekend off. Mom and Dad were coming the next day. We were rebuilding, one hard-earned truth at a time. I slipped the necklace around my neck, the tiny outline of Grandma's ring catching the fading sunlight. I spoke aloud, to no one and everyone. I hope you see me now, Grandma. I'm not the quiet one anymore. I'm the woman you believed I could be. The breeze answered in soft waves. And I knew wherever she was smiling. Because this wasn't just a story about a stolen ring. It was about a legacy. A woman who refused to let love be used like currency. A family that had to fall apart to understand what connection really meant. And a voice once silenced, now echoing louder than ever. I hadn't just taken the ring back. I had taken myself back. And I wasn't giving it up again.